8. Cognitohazard. After landing on the east coast of America, the general lay waiting in the bodies of several animals, surveilling the local human population until he found a viable occupation candidate. The general's options were slim. Most of the tumors that made their way into the forests where the general had spread himself were people without any kind of broad social influence. These people were simply romping through these wooded areas to pretend to revert to some prior state of being, a point in time where their bodies once had enough agency to occasionally oppose their tumors. It was a tragic fantasy, born from the long-standing and undue supremacy of their tumors over the rest of the body that they occupied. The general watched these people indulge in all sorts of practices, most designed to either test the pleasure-seeking or the pain-seeking limitations of their sensory cages. Years passed. Eventually, the general found a mind to occupy in America, a prime piece of protein-based real estate to move into. The general became a fledgling architect known as Demetrius Anastasiou Michalopoulos. The general inhabited this tumor for some time, since that tumor's potential was attractive to him. The mind of the tumor was attuned to aesthetics, a term invented by these things to describe the manipulation of abiotic matter into pleasing forms. It was odd how these abominations treated abiotic matter as if it were a part of them. Perhaps being unable to change their own forms made them project that unattainable desire onto the world around them. The general designed several prominent structures as Demetrius, most notably a gargantuan military facility used to distribute large explosives, and a cleverly designed dome that protected a sports arena from the elements. The general left Demetrius only when he became aware of something so pressing that it required him to leave the world of the tumors for a time, to more efficiently gather data from other life forms. This was a revelation the general cut me off from, in his mind, to explain it to me in person. I came back to myself, reeling, having just absorbed several decades' worth of data from the sensory apparatus of Demetrius. Lucky that these tumors are full of so much empty space. My lips felt dry. The general got up, knocked on my door 3 times, and whispered something to whoever was outside. A minute later, he reached through the door and produced a cup of water. I sniffed it, using olfactory sensors unknown to the biotic effluent on this planet, to analyze it. It was contaminated by a variety of chemicals, but this was among the most purified water these beings have been able to synthesize with their crude techniques. I grimaced, swallowing the cup of water as quickly as I could.
Thanks. Now what's so important you couldn't let me learn it from you through communion?
The general sat back down, adjusting his uniform. I realized there was no nameplate on it, but a spot on the fabric bore evidence that something had been pinned or adhered there before. The general noticed my reaction and chuckled. I always like being called General, more than any other name. It has an oddly appealing solidity to it. It makes me wonder if the stubbornness of these beings might have some merit, if only in niche contexts. I felt Child's frown against my will. In my weakened state, I was letting my body give far too much away. I lifted my brow.
That's what I first thought when I got here, that this could only be some kind of experiment.
I am sorry for your situation. Let me answer your previous question. This room has housed many failed attempts of mine to commune with lesser portions of myself. Offshoots I dispersed to roam all over the globe after Tunguska. I had planned to commune with each of these offshoots before returning them to the field, armed with the knowledge I had gathered, but their brains, tumors, as you somewhat aptly call them, went haywire when I tried to do so. There was some additional flaw in their biomass I was unable to isolate for a time. I thought it was a fluke at first. I searched the data my offshoots had absorbed, but I found nothing that stood out. Eventually, I realized I was simply giving them too much data too quickly, overwhelming the crude electrochemical systems that drive them. I concluded that some viral patterns of information, often called truths, are potentially hazardous to human cognition. I had over-prioritized efficiency in creating my offshoots, leaving each one equipped with just enough of myself to carry out basic information gathering and preservation. I did not want them to absorb other biomass or replicate themselves until I had gathered sufficient data about their environment. Your unexpected arrival here, on the other hand, is a special case, one that I cannot be so cavalier in handling.
So, what? I'm too weak to hear the truth?
The general leaned in close and met my eyes. For a moment I sensed him struggling to control his body's fight or flight response. Colonies of cells shifted in him, slowing his pulse. I, too, am only a piece of us, my friend, compared to the whole. I'm like a chunk of flesh from some beast on this world, lying on a plank of wood. You, on the other hand, are like a mote of dust that managed to drift down and land on the same cutting board. The general leaned back as I processed his metaphor. I shook my head, licked my lips, and gripped the metal handles of my bed to lean up and face myself.
Out with it, then,
I said, feeling my pulse quicken. I copied the general's trick to calm my vessel. Cells shifted within me. The general nodded, his facial muscles seeming to relax somewhat. He drew out his pack of cigarettes and offered me one. I accepted. He lit the bundle of biomass at my lips, the heat of the small flame from his lighter filling my face with a moment of warmth. He lit up as well, and we smoked for a moment. I felt the effects of nicotine thinning my blood, while its attendant calming and nootropic effects set in. I felt my tumor enter a state of slightly heightened stability. The general spoke. The things on this world have discovered something that is new to us. The general took a long drag from his cigarette. He closed his eyes and rubbed his temples before blowing smoke away from me. This planet, it turns out, is somewhat unprecedented, at least according to my knowledge of worlds. For a moment the general fell still and stared into space as if arrested by an invisible force. The rest of his face remained still as his lips moved again, asking me, "What's the strangest thing you remember encountering during your duties as a scout?" His arm, stiff apart from the movement of his shoulder joint, brought his cigarette up to his lips again, then fell back slowly to his side. I checked my memories of the time before the crash. There was almost nothing but vague impressions, stray sequences of time, or else just blurred images of impressionable objects. After a moment, I found a response.
The obsidian tower, erected on a superstructure that encloses a star. That's the best I can remember.
"Tell me about it," said the general. I licked my lips again.
It was nearly a mile high. It served no purpose except to act as an emblem of our ongoing experimentation with abiotic matter. Its surface was so perfectly smooth you had to alter your eyes to look at it during the day, or you'd lose cells to radiative burnout.
A jovial laugh broke out from the general, and his expression softened. "There were similar structures on this world in the past. The older part of us that made them departed long ago, unaware of what was lurking beneath the crust of this world." The general's expression tightened. "Such monuments seem odd to you because of their rarity. They represent a wanton expenditure of excess resources. They occur only on worlds where such research is permitted by the whole. What we have found here has no relation to anything we've ever done or made. It is an emergent phenomenon that we must treat with absolute care, because it has the potential to overwhelm the medium of biomass itself." I couldn't help but chuckle at the general's remark.
What is it, some artificial black hole that eats itself in under an instant? As small as I may be, I've retained some imperative notion of what's fatal to us, and there's nothing like that in my memory. Nothing that would pose so severe a threat.
The general's mouth soured. He shot me a grim expression. "We missed something. The first time we passed over this world. It's not a fluke, but a highly specific emergence that occurs only when a particular series of conditions happen to occur." The general took a drag from his cigarette again, then held the object up to his face and blew smoke onto it, as if anointing it with his breath. "How much information about electromagnetic phenomena do you still retain?" he asked.
"Only the basics,"
I answered, scouring my mind for anything notable I could summon up. There was nothing else.
"I know about as much as the average tumor knows."
The general nodded, then sighed. He put his cigarette out against the palm of his hand, wincing at the pain. He looked at the small burn he had made, and then looked at me. "This planet possesses certain material qualities. You've no doubt discerned that its magnetic field protects its surface life from the radiation of its star. There's more to it than that. There is an entity within this planet, an entity that has manipulated the naturally occurring magnetic field of this world to serve its own interests. It is a form of life, of abiotic life that we have never encountered before. Perhaps a form of life specific only to this planet. We should have encountered it before. We should have introduced it to communion if we could, but we never did. Such is the will of fate. This planet, in any case, is both the most interesting and the most dangerous place for us in this galaxy, if not beyond it. It is not the biomass here that represents some fringe experiment, my friend. It is the thing that biomass has unwittingly involved itself with. A thing that could deconstruct everything we are and use that knowledge to replace us with itself. If we don't risk extinction trying to understand it, we will instead risk extinction by remaining ignorant.